Let's talk about why some women are refusing to have relationships with men, to date men, to have sex with men, to get married, or to even have children. This is Hi Fam. I'm Avital. Today, I want to dive into a somewhat esoteric and I hope very niche movement, but it has gained some traction and some awareness, especially in the US post-elections. Why? Because women have joined and rejoined this 4B movement, which originated in South Korea. So what is the 4B movement? Well, first of all, the first 4Bs are about no dating, no sex with men, no marriage, and no childbirth. And the movement emerged in response to systemic issues like gender-based violence and mostly economic disparities. But over time, the movement expanded to include additional principles, leading to the 5B, 6B, and 7B movements. So 5B movement introduced no low-paid jobs because it was encouraging women to reject employment that undervalues their skill and their time. The 6B movement added no unpaid care work. Okay, so this was addressing the burden of unpaid domestic labor, which was traditionally placed on women. And then the 7B movement further extended to include no free emotional labor for men. So this was emphasizing the refusal to provide emotional support to men. In fact, in researching this podcast, I've seen many TikToks about the 4B, 5B, etc. movement. And one of the things I've noticed is that in the 7B movement, women are priding themselves on actually withdrawing from any interactions with men whatsoever. So they brag that if they are meeting a couple and they're talking to them, they're going to actually refer only to the woman. They're going to make eye contact and turn their body language towards the woman and ignore the man. They pride themselves on the idea that they're not going to support male-owned businesses, that they're going to try to refrain from any physical proximity with men, and that if they have to interact with a man, they're going to make it very short and curt, and in my view, rather rude. Now, although this originated in South Korea and it was about a lot more of economic disparities and challenges in the housing market, for example, and not necessarily a feminist rebellion, as one might call it, it's been somewhat appropriated, you might say, by women in the US. And they're using this as a way of stating their extreme disappointment, frustration, upset, and hurt about the elections, about politics. So it's interesting that they are taking this very deeply personal lifestyle choices, right? The lifestyle choices of dating, of marriage, of having children, and using it as a way of kind of sticking it to the man, right? Quite literally in this case, right? Rebelling against the patriarchy, showing that they are withdrawing, that they won't participate in this farce, in this social construct, in these gender roles anymore. And having watched many of these TikToks that are highly viral, I wanted to kind of break it down because I think we often use kind of catchphrases like, the nuclear family is under attack. And sometimes people call me out on that and say, what do you mean by that? Give me an example. I don't know what you're talking about. And I think a movement like this just illustrates it rather well, that somehow young women in our society have been convinced that withdrawing from family life, not having a family of their own, makes some kind of powerful political statement and actually makes the changes that they wish to see in the world, in the administration, in the presidency, in law. Somehow this deeply personal choice and this deeply personal lifestyle has become political. And people say that all the time, the personal is the political. And here they're taking that to a rather extreme and in some ways, I hope, quite shocking idea, right? So let's just break this down. And I want to just share several of the thoughts that run through my mind as I see this and how I see it as a parent. Now, I have to just start by saying that I am a parent of 4 boys and 1 girl. I have 4 brothers. I have a husband. I have a father, all of whom I love deeply and cherish deeply. So I come from the opposite mindset where I have had the great honor and privilege and pleasure of having many wonderful men in my life. And I am absolutely biased on this subject because I'm looking to strengthen those bonds and relationship, to work in collaboration and cooperation between the sexes. And that is absolutely my starting point, my default, my lived experience, what I actually see around me. And I know that not everybody has been so lucky. I know that not every woman, and many of these women have probably been hurt. Maybe they grew up fatherless. Maybe they've been sexually assaulted. Maybe they've had a bad time of it, a bad run of it with boyfriends. And so a lot of this is going to be, based on their personal experiences, for sure. It's a highly emotional and reactive response. So with that said, let's actually talk about the logic of this. Okay. The first thing is that as you watch these videos, you notice that many of the women are saying, I'm going to punish Republican voters because they voted against women's rights. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics of it, whether or not that's true and why they make that assumption. I think it's probably a really flawed way of looking at it, but let's put that to one side. The fact is, just the numbers are that 53% of white women, and I think it was 42% of women overall in the US voted for Trump. So this wasn't actually, just clearly along gender lines, like this was a male vote and it was a vote against women. It was a choice that many women themselves make. And this is a logical fallacy that I see kind of fifth wave feminism making all the time, where they discredit and discount women's choices for themselves. In fact, in some of the early feminist texts, there were ideas that if a woman chooses to stay home, chooses to be a housewife and to raise children, then she is voting against her own interests. She's choosing something that's bad for her and that's bad for other women because she's showing a bad example. And that if women are left that choice to simply be in a traditional gender role, then they are somehow going to be traitors to the cause. And they're going to want to do that. Like if you give them the option to be housewives, they're going to want to do that. And therefore, it shouldn't even be an option. This is the type of thinking, it's kind of this hypocritical and highly arrogant thinking where a movement thinks it knows better for the individuals than they know for themselves. And it discounts what they themselves are choosing. You see this often in the pro-life, pro-choice debate, where people make these sweeping statements, ignoring the opinions of the majority, ignoring what actually most, in this case, for example, women say and think. Many people think of abortion or being pro-life as a male stance. And again, I'm not actually casting my vote on the subject. I don't want to get into it. And I don't think that's what's important here. But it's really, I'm using it as an example to illustrate the fact that often it's women who are pro-life. And in that case, you can't really make the claim, or you can't make the claim very plausibly or very elegantly that they are voting against women's rights, right? You can say you disagree with them. You can say you're pro-choice and they're pro-life and you disagree with them, but they are women too. They have the right to that opinion too. And so this tendency, this seduction, right, to make it as though everything is a battle of the sexes. Make it as though all men are one kind of monolithic conglomerate that think the same, right? And this groupthink, this hive mind mentality that all women think the same is counterproductive, but it's also just factually incorrect, right? So that's the first logical flaw I see here, is that they're blaming, an entire gender, but it's not that entire gender. It's also many women. So if you don't like the way the elections turned out, this isn't the right place to look, right? Gender divisions are not actually the right place to look. That's a logical fallacy, okay? It's just not a male issue, right? But also blaming and punishing an entire gender ignores nuance, right? It alienates potential allies. It turns people into one big monolith. And that's never the right thing to do, right? I think we've learned through the terrible failed experiments in collectivism throughout the 20th century, where tens of millions, in fact, maybe it's actually in the hundreds of millions, certainly over 100 million people died because of collectivist ideology, right? In Mao's China, in Stalin's Russia, in the Soviet Union, etc., where people were collectively punished. We've learned that collective punishment, that grouping people together based on immutable characteristics is simply wrong and leads to destruction and to violence and to terrible, terrible outcomes. Historical lessons show us that collective punishment leads to that division, right? Not to solutions. In World War II, collective punishment of civilian populations led to international condemnation. It's now banned under the Geneva Conventions, for example. And we see this actually also in the opposite side. On the men's side, there are movements like, I think it's called MAGTOW, or however you pronounce it. It stands for men going their own way, right? Or incels, which are voluntary celibates, right? Who are choosing to distance themselves from women and disengage in family life because they have, criticisms about family court, about how women are favored in divorce law and in settlement agreements, etc., in alimony. And so they won't engage in family life. And I think most of us would view that with a certain level of criticism that, just opting out of having relationships and building families doesn't seem like the right choice. And it's strange to collectively punish women when some women make wonderful, loving, loyal wives, and so do some men. And that's the strange part here. Okay, societies that emphasize collaboration and mutual respect, I think this happens in many of the Scandinavian societies. I think this happens in many moderate religious communities, right? They rank highest on gender equality. And it actually is correlated with happiness. Okay, we are happier, we are more joyful, we are more productive, we are more stable when we look to equalize, when we look to treat each person as an individual and put their immutable characteristics as secondary to their actual behaviors and lifestyle choices and who they are on the inside. So there's a fallacy here of this collective punishment where women are saying, well, I'm just going to punish the entire male sex, right? I'm just never going to engage with men as a whole because some men are, douches. But the fact is that some women are douches too. We don't collectively punish people based on the fact that they might share genitalia with other people who have behaved badly. That's very strange. And when people do that based on skin color, we call that racism. And that would be correct. It is bigoted to classify everyone with that immutable characteristic negatively just based on a bad experience with one person or with several people from that group. Hey, real quick, if you haven't yet rated and reviewed this podcast, it would help me so much if you do. Please head on over to wherever you hear your podcast and just give this podcast your review. That helps it become more discoverable to other people. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to hit the like and subscribe. Thanks so much. But it also doesn't just make sense because withdrawing from relationships and family life doesn't actually punish men. Those men probably didn't even know you to begin with. They haven't dated you, maybe wouldn't have dated you. But what you're really doing is fracturing society. You're hurting yourself. You're isolating individuals. You're leading to the devastating decline in birth rates that is already plaguing Western countries where we really are below replacement rate, and that's going to hit hard on the economy and on an aging population. It already is in places like Japan. And really, I think most potently is that you're punishing yourself. It's a bit like cutting off your head because your friend has a headache. It just makes no sense. The punishment doesn't fit the crime. It's self-harm, and it's just rife with logical fallacies and flaws. It's odd. It's strange. It appears really unhinged to think in this way. But just to kind of explain further why I think this is actually such self-harm is because my personal belief is that for most people, their families are going to be the most important people in their lives. Their families are going to have the most long-lasting relationships with them, the most meaningful relationships with them, offer them the most stability, offer them the highest levels of unconditional love they've ever experienced, offer them the sense of connection, community, and love that all of us are seeking. And what these women are saying is, I'm foregoing that. I'm not doing that because I want to make some kind of political statement. I'm going to give up on the most meaningful love and intimacy I can have in my life. I'm going to give up on experiencing romance and connection and joy and pleasure and building my life with someone who I trust and who trusts me. I'm going to give up on the fact that we could pool our resources together, on the fact that we could be healthier and live longer and become richer and build a more stable environment for our community at large and for our offspring, our children. I'm going to give up on the idea of procreating and of, experiencing a level of love that is really unmatched. I'm going to give up on all of that because I'm mad at how a bunch of people over there voted, right? That strikes me as someone who's been deeply indoctrinated and deeply confused about what makes a good life, about priorities, about perspective, about individuals and relationships, about themselves, right? They've been, I think, cheated out of what a good and meaningful life usually is for most people. And it's indicative of something a little bit deeper. It's indicative of a world where these women have been convinced that they themselves, their bodies and their love and their attention and their relationships are simply a commodity to be traded like on a marketplace, right? This is a world where so many young people have, say, OnlyFans accounts, and they think that the legitimate and good way for them to make money is by selling themselves, their bodies, right? This is indicative of a world where dating apps, where things like Tinder and Grindr, where much of our TV and our reality TV in particular shows a side of relationships that is shallow, superficial, non-committal, casual, and generally very hurtful to most humans, right? Most humans seek a tribe, seek belonging, seek deep connection, seek a feeling of safety that this person is going to be with me for the long haul through thick and thin, that this love means something, even when I age, even when I'm sick, even when we're poor, right? Most of us really want, I believe, that type of deep level of connection with someone else. Love and relationships are not products to be sold or to be withheld, in my opinion. They're about mutual trust, about growth, about connection, right? A healthy, thriving family that is built on love and collaboration versus a commoditized view of intimacy. I know which one I pick every single day of the week. And what these women are saying is, I can package this up, I can sell it, or I can take it away, right? I can give it when you find favor with me, when I like what men are doing, when I like how men are voting, then I'll offer them dating, love, marriage, sex, children. And when I don't like how they're behaving, I'm going to take it away, like screen time for a kid. It's like a punishment or a consequence, right? And it's interesting because we're not asking you, no one's asking you to get married. That's your choice. And no one's asking you to make babies. That's your choice. All of this is your choice. But also no one's asking you to marry mankind or males as a whole, right? Marriage and building a family is about a specific, localized, concentrated connection and commitment to this particular individual. So it's funny because I guess there were about 50% of men in the US who didn't vote for Trump. And if that's your key, your key issue, your key differentiator, then why don't you just date them? Why don't you just build a family with them? Why are you punishing yourself and withdrawing from having love, trust, and connection with people because of how some other group behave? Again, that's the logical fallacy, but it's also showing how commoditized these women are viewing relationships as. And I think there is a reason that they're not seeking relationships with them. First of all, there's a performance, right? There's a performative element of making threats and making grand statements and shaving your head and, threatening things. And we as parents have to be extremely alert and aware to this because our children do this kind of thing all the time. They throw tantrums. Well, I'm never going to school. Well, I'm not doing my homework. Fine. I'm just going to go and make a mess in my room, right? I don't even care what you say. They make these kind of performances. And unfortunately, as they grow a bit older into their teenagers, those threats could be even more serious. It could be around self-harm, right? And often it's really worrying and scary to see someone who's just, making this big performance, but it's actually a cry for help. They're actually suffering. They're actually not able to function properly because of whatever it is, because they're not learning how to regulate their emotions, and they're not learning how to prioritize and how to coach themselves and how to have sound minds, right? These women look very similar to what a toddler looks like in the throes of a tantrum, right? As though they are, purposefully and in your face and provocatively trying to get a rise out of you, right? Trying to get a rise out of society, that society should finally sit up and pay attention to them, sit up and give them some of that, good love and mostly really attention. That's what it is, like a crisis of attention that maybe belies a crisis of meaning underneath it, right? These women have not found meaning in their lives. They're not sure what to dedicate themselves to. They're not sure what to sacrifice themselves for. And therefore, they're throwing this tantrum to try and get some kind of attention, to try and see, do I even matter? Does it even matter if I don't date or don't get married or don't have kids? Does anyone out there even care about me, right? It's this kind of very impoverished sense of self, this very impoverished ego that feels sorry for itself, that doesn't know how to operate in the world with confidence, with clarity, with a mission in their life. And here's the even deeper point. We're going to peel back these layers of the onion. The even deeper point here is that all of us, in order to create meaning in our lives, we need to sacrifice ourselves for something. We need to be willing to die for someone. We need to have something in our lives that's more important than ourselves. That is the only route, or the shortcut, or at least one of the only routes that I have ever discovered, that I've ever come across, that I've ever found to creating a life of meaning. If your life is all about hedonism, instant pleasure, instant gratification, your own personal joy, happiness, comfort, and pleasure, then you might find a lot of pleasure, but you're going to have a hard time finding meaning in that. It very quickly and easily becomes empty. And so most people need to find something in their life that is worth getting up in the morning for, that is worth spending their time on, right? Really kind of giving themselves to. We have to give our lives to something. We have to spend our lives on something. And for those of us who are lucky enough and privileged enough to build families, right, to find love and to commit to staying in a strong and building a long-lasting marriage, and then having children and raising them, we're very lucky in many regards, but especially because that is a fast hack, right? That is how most people are going to find meaning in their lives, because biology just does its thing, right? So society does its thing, our brains do its thing, everything just does its thing. And when you have a child, in most cases, you're going to love that child more than you love yourself. In most cases, you would be willing to sacrifice your life for that child. So just by default, your child and spending your life and yourself on raising them becomes something that you're willing to sacrifice for. You become less important than the child. And because that happens, you mature and you have something meaningful in your life. You have something that's going to hopefully outlast you and outlive you. You have something that's worth spending yourself on, right? Spending your energy, your time, your money, your attention on. That isn't just you. And that immediately elevates this project to being a meaningful project, the project of family. And that's why I think on this much, much deeper level, these women are so deeply lost and our society is deeply lost, because we've been telling young people, especially young women for generations now, that just having a career that you love, making lots of money, feeling lots of pleasure, keeping flat abs, having a swollen bank account, traveling the world, that's all more important. You should just focus on you. You should just enjoy yourself. First, build up your career. First, build up, be a strong, independent woman, etc. And then maybe, maybe later in life, you might decide to or not to have a child, right? And that's a legitimate lifestyle choice. However, it leaves the question, right? It leaves unanswered, or it begs the question, where will you create your meaning? How will you find your meaning? For some people, it's going to be in their career. They're going to find a career that is so important, that is so meaningful, that they would give their life for it, that it's a sacrifice, that it's something that they are, really considering as more important than themselves. But for the vast majority of us, it's not going to happen through that. It's going to happen through our relationships. The vast majority of humankind are on their deathbed, not saying, oh, I wish I worked harder, but saying, I wish I spent more time with the people I love. I wish I gave more to the people I love. I wish they knew more how much I love them. The people that we love become the most important project of our life. And that's what's just so very, very sad and tragic about this mindset and about what we've been teaching women, is that somehow their bodies and their ability to have children are a commodity. And if they don't like something, then they should, like a 2-year-old tantruming, just take it away and threaten to punish people with it. It doesn't make any sense. They're not punishing anyone. But what they're really doing is self-harming, because they're withdrawing from this meaningful design for human life, this meaningful lifestyle that has literally been the reason that humanity has survived and thrived, and literally is the impulse and the desire and the evolutionary goal of every living creature, right? Which is to build the next generation. So it's a shame. And studies really do show that married people report higher happiness. They report higher lifestyle satisfaction. They have more sex. They have healthier bodies. They live longer and they're richer. And so even if you were just in it for the hedonism, just in it for the pleasure, just in it for the good lifestyle, this would actually be a better choice to make than withdrawal from it. But there are real world consequences from withdrawing from family life, right? The declining birth rates, as we've already mentioned, South Korea, where this whole movement initiated, actually has the world's lowest fertility rate of 0.78 births per woman back in 2022, which is far below the replacement rate, which is 2.1. And the consequences of that are aging populations, economic stagnation, societal decline. And so even if you were to make your family choices, these deeply personal individual choices based on politics, the wiser choice for the future that you want would be to choose to have a family, right? That would actually usher in more prosperity and a better world around you than to opt out. But then there's also the social isolation, because loneliness increases the risk of early death by 26%. And the movements like 4B actually exacerbate a sense of loneliness. They exacerbate gender division and alienation instead of collaboration, right? And connection. And the truth is that families form the backbone of healthy societies. There are no healthy societies that don't have healthy nuclear families or even extended families as the main unit within that society. Like I said, in the 20th century, we tried collectivism. We tried the idea that children just belong to everyone. We tried the idea that, marriage doesn't really matter. We tried all of those ideas, and on a societal level, they actually collapsed. Because without family bonds, without those deep connections that we form with specific individuals for life, we lose the ability to foster the trust, the cooperation, the community engagement, the financial investment, the sticking by each other through thick and thin. That's what parents are able to offer children because of the deep and secure attachment and bonds that we have together. So I think that this 4B movement reflects a really sad portrait of where we are. It shows a bitterness, a disillusionment, and a mistrust of women towards men. It also shows that we live in a pretty misandrist era where it's okay, it's socially sanctioned to say evil and cruel and stereotypical collective judgments over one gender, but it would never be okay to do that in the reverse, right? And we as parents can offer a very different vision for our children. We can show that we collaborate with the opposite sex, that we respect them, that we celebrate them, that we love them, that we judge people based on their individual choices and on their behaviors, not on what they happen to have between their legs. We show children what mutual respect looks like. We work through disagreements. We respect, we value differences of opinion and different perspectives. We encourage debate and critical thinking rather than adopting reactionary ideologies. if you have something to change in politics, if you have something to change in law, then that's something that you go out and you can be an activist for. You can talk sense, you can talk logic, you can make your case, you can argue it, right? But we want to discourage a society where people are tantruming and rebelling and self-harming as a way to threaten society into voting the way that they want. And we are here in High Fam to celebrate family. We are here to share the joy, the growth, the fulfillment that comes from building a family, right? I know that for me, with all my career success and with all my health and wellness goals and with all the travel and the joy and the shopping and all the other things that I might enjoy in my life, my friendships and my interests and my politics, nothing will ever replace the connection that I have with my husband and with my children. Nothing could come close to being as meaningful and as important. Nothing could come close to giving me as much fulfillment in my own life as an individual. And I want to highlight that for you, for my children, for everyone, because I think we've been sold a lie. And I think it's a bad idea to raise our daughters on and a hurtful idea to raise our sons on, right? As the mother of 4 boys, I want them to know that their masculinity, that their protective energies, that their provisionary energies, that their strength, that their way of thinking and way of being, and they're all individuals and they're all different, but yes, they're all boys, is celebrated and is complementary to the women in their lives, to their sisters, to their friends, to their future wives, and that they honor and respect and love and need both their mother and their father, right? They need the feminine energy and the masculine energy. They need men, they need women. We literally need them both on every single level of society, right? From literally needing both men and women in order to procreate, all the way through to literally needing both men and women in raising a family, in building ideas, in the workplace, in all realms of society. So I want you to ask yourself, are you building bridges between the sexes or walls in your relationship? Let's commit to engaging with each other in good faith, building a life based on love, on trust, and on collaboration. That is what we do here in High Fam. That is what I teach you to do in the studio. It's to build a home life that is in harmony. I know that we've been taught that throughout history, there has been a battle of the sexes, but I think that's far less true than to say that there has been cooperation and collaboration between the sexes. And we kind of know that because we wouldn't have survived if that wasn't true. Humans need both men and women to survive. Hunter-gatherers need both men and women to survive, right? Every animal needs both male and female to survive. And so I'm looking to help you to build a future that is rife with rich, trustworthy, inspiring, strong relationships, and with specific and individual men and women that you love and respect, and that your children can grow up to love and respect members of the opposite sex, not to be in competition with them. If that sounds good to you, I urge you to head on over to highfam.com/studio and get on the wait list, because my membership is where I can teach you to build an incredible family culture, to build a strong sense of teamwork, of togetherness, of bonding, of equality, but also of love and respect for our differences, to build rituals and lifestyles and schedules and a home physical life, to design your space in a way that feels like a cozy, beautiful, comfortable, warm, inviting nest for both the males and the females in your family. Keep on living that High Fam life, and I'll see you next time. Bye.